We find ourselves in ancient Egypt, 13 centuries before Jesus was born. Moses, a young boy who was adopted, resides within the palace of the pharaohs. His name, Moshe, already reveals a part of his story. He was born to a Jewish woman from the tribe of Levi and was saved from the waters by the pharaoh's daughter. She discovered him in a basket made of reeds floating in the Nile. During this time, the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians, subjected to harsh and inhumane work conditions. Fearing their increasing population, the pharaoh issued a decree that all male Jewish infants were to be killed at birth. As a result, Moses' mother chose to place him in God's hands by abandoning him in a waterproof basket in the river. She believed that if it was God's will, he would protect and save him. St. Gregory of Nyssa reflects on this event, suggesting that it was freedom itself that served as the midwife for Moses. His deliverance came through water, facilitated by a woman who rescued him and became his mother. Within this miraculous event, we can see the essence of the human condition. Humans are inherently created to be free and entrusted with their own choices. Much of what we become is a direct result of our own decisions and self-determination. The concept of freedom, which applies to both you and me at birth, extends beyond mere theory. It intertwines with our personal narratives and becomes a part of everyone's history. We have the freedom over time to discover our true selves and to participate in the divine orchestration of our destinies. A particular event in Moses' life serves as a foreshadowing of the purpose for which God meticulously crafted him, to lead the people of Israel out of slavery. It is almost as if to say that the journey of every liberator begins with their own experience of liberation. And it is through this liberation that we cultivate the qualities within ourselves that enable us to be fully free in both body and spirit. In the life of Moses, St. Gregory of Nyssa asserts, "It is the sole responsibility of freedom to generate virtue, to nourish it with appropriate sustenance, and to safeguard it from harm when faced with adversity." The life of Moses reveals that freedom is the destiny that God desires for all humanity. This becomes evident when we recall a prophecy made by Moses many years later, which connects his life to the arrival of a great prophet from the tribe of Levi, Deuteronomy 18:15-22. Traditionally, Moses' life is seen as containing numerous indications of the figure of Jesus from Nazareth. For instance, Moses is saved from the water, and baptism in water symbolizes the salvation of Christians. Similarly, Moses is taken out of the water and adopted by a woman, becoming her son through God's intervention. This parallels Jesus' birth from a woman through the divine work of God. Furthermore, Moses goes on to become the liberator of his people, leading them through the waters of the Passover and bringing them to the promised land, just as Jesus liberates humanity from sin through his passion, death on the cross, and resurrection. Jesus offers new life and reconciles the world with the Father. In summary, these few examples demonstrate why it has been crucial for Christians throughout history to interpret the New Testament in light of the Old Testament, and vice versa. As Augustine said, "The New Testament is hidden in the Old, while the Old is revealed in the New." Quaestiones in Heptateuch 2:73. Now let's delve deeper into Moses' journey. One does not become a liberator overnight. It is not a mere self-proclamation. True liberation requires growth and understanding of freedom, and who better to comprehend it than someone who has experienced slavery firsthand? In the life of Moses, the central theme of freedom encompasses his entire existence, which is devoted to serving the people he has been commanded by God to set free. With these sentiments deeply ingrained in his soul, Moses ascends Mount Horeb and experiences a magnificent manifestation of God, known as a theophany among biblical scholars. Pope Francis, in one of his Wednesday catecheses, eloquently paints a vivid picture of Moses during this particular phase of his life. When God summons him, Moses is perceived as a failure from a human perspective. The book of Exodus portrays him as a fugitive in the land of Midian. In his youth, he had shown empathy towards his people and had even aligned himself with the oppressed. However, he soon realized that despite his noble intentions, he was unable to bring about justice through his own actions. Instead, violence ensued. At this point, his dreams of glory were shattered. Moses was no longer seen as a promising official with a bright future, but rather as someone who had squandered his opportunities and was now tending to someone else's flock. It is precisely in the solitude of the Midian desert that God calls out to Moses through the revelation of a burning bush, proclaiming, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." During this encounter with God at Mount Horeb, Moses realizes that despite his previous setbacks and feelings of inadequacy, he is being called upon by the Almighty to fulfill a divine purpose. This revelation not only reaffirms his identity and lineage, but also ignites a renewed sense of hope and determination within him. Moses gradually comprehends that his failures and limitations do not define him. Rather, they serve as stepping stones towards fulfilling his destiny. The encounter with the burning bush marks a pivotal moment in Moses' life. It signifies the beginning of his journey towards becoming a revered leader and liberator of his people. Through this divine encounter, Moses is infused with the unwavering conviction that God has chosen him for a significant task, to confront Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites from their enslavement in Egypt. In essence, Moses' life is a testament to the transformative power of God's call and the resilience of the human spirit. Despite his initial shortcomings and doubts, Moses emerges as an exemplary figure who leads his people towards freedom and redemption. His story serves as an inspiration, reminding us that even in our moments of perceived failure, we can rise above our circumstances and fulfill our true purpose when guided by faith and obedience to a higher calling. A burning bush speaks to him with the voice of God. "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Exodus 3:7-10. Moses is ready to embrace his mission, but he doesn't know it. In fact, he believes he is not capable, but God reassures him, "I will be with you." Exodus 3:11-12. Moses will doubt several times more, even though God shows him his assistance every time. He must learn to trust God and the people who are placed alongside him. After the well-known 10 plagues in Egypt, whose symbolism we will study in another dedicated video, the Pharaoh will be compelled to release the Israelites, only to regret his decision later and embark on a pursuit of them. Moses takes charge and leads the people, who hastily departed the previous evening after partaking in a meal prescribed by God himself, known as the Passover. With the Egyptian army hot on their heels, Moses finds himself confronted with the Red Sea. With divine assistance from the Lord God, he stretches out his hands over the waters, creating a remarkable pathway through which the Israelites safely cross to the other side. God intervenes by slowing down the chariots of the Egyptians, and when Moses stretches out his hands once more, the sea closes in, swallowing up the Pharaoh's army along with their chariots and horses. This momentous event is commemorated annually between Friday evening and Saturday, falling on the 14th and 15th of the month of Nisan. On Friday afternoon, lambs are sacrificed for the entire community, and from Saturday night until Sunday morning, the entire world pauses. It is the Lord's Passover. Exodus 12:10. 13 centuries later, on the 14th of Nisan, Jesus of Nazareth will meet his death during those very same hours. After crossing the Red Sea, Moses will accompany his people for a period of 40 years in the desert. The number 40 is a recurring theme in sacred scriptures. You can find more information about the significance of the story of Noah by following the link located in the top right corner. In order to lead his people to freedom, Moses had to endure numerous challenges. These included facing the hostility of the Pharaoh, battling countless enemies, and dealing with the misunderstanding and ingratitude of his own people towards both him and the God who had freed them. If freedom is something worth living for, then it is worth facing ingratitude and misunderstandings from others. While freedom may be given to you, it is up to you to seize it. Adversities can be overcome if you are fully convinced of fighting for freedom, but most importantly, if you believe that life without that promised freedom is not worth living, not just for yourself, but for everyone. This freedom is part of a larger plan in which humanity plays a significant role. During his time in the desert, Moses learns a crucial lesson. He learns the importance of praying for his people who are also fighting for freedom. Through an exhausting prayer, he realizes that his hands, raised towards the sky, become tired and require support from others. Exodus 17:11-12. He learns to communicate with God face to face, just as one speaks to a friend. Exodus 33:11. This intimate connection with the divine strengthens him and gives him guidance as he leads his people through the challenges they face. The story of Moses teaches us that true freedom is not just about physical liberation, but also about the internal battles we must face within ourselves and the relationships we build with others. It reminds us that even in the midst of adversity, prayer and faith can provide strength and support. Ultimately, it is through unity and a shared commitment to freedom that we can overcome any obstacle. In this long journey, with God's assistance, Moses matures as a man, as a prophet, as the father of the people he liberated. For a period of 40 years, the Israelites journeyed through the desert until they finally reached the land of Canaan, where they would settle. At this point, Moses, who was now advanced in age, climbed a mountain where the Lord would reveal to him the promised land. The Lord said, "This is the land I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants." Despite seeing the land with his own eyes, Moses was not allowed to enter it, as stated in Deuteronomy 34:4. This raises the question, why was Moses forbidden from entering the promised land after all the sacrifices he had made? The answer lies in the instructions given by God to Moses on how to bring forth water from a rock. God showed compassion towards his people and entrusted Moses with the task of providing them with water. However, it was during this task that Moses committed a sin, or rather, multiple sins, which resulted in him being barred from entering the promised land. His first sin was acting in anger. While this is not to justify Moses' actions, it should be noted that his sister had just passed away, the people were once again complaining, and he was physically and mentally exhausted. In this state, he approached God with a troubled heart, which goes against what Paul advises in Ephesians 4:26-27. Instead of following God's instructions, Moses let his anger get the best of him and acted on his own. He did not speak to the rock as he was instructed, but instead, he struck it, almost as a way to release his frustration. This was not a good attitude to have, as his heart was not in the right place. When we are troubled, we must first resolve our issues and then come before God with a clean heart and a clear mind, as mentioned in Matthew 5:23-24 and Mark 11:25. This will allow the Lord to bless us and use us for his purpose, rather than being consumed by our own emotions and looking to men for validation, as Colossians 3:23 reminds us. Another sin committed by Moses was pride. He and Aaron acted as if they had the power to bring forth water from the rock, which was not the case. While the Lord had used them to perform miracles, it was not because of their own abilities. In their proud state, they forgot all the things God had done for them and failed to recognize that only God could provide water from the rock. This serves as a reminder for us to remain humble and not let pride overtake us, especially when God uses us for his purpose. We must always remember that without God's help, we are nothing. As stated in 1 Corinthians 1:26-30, if we allow pride to consume us, the Lord will not be able to use us for his work. Nevertheless, the Lord brought water out of the rock anyway, not because of what Moses did, but because he had promised it, and God is faithful and always keeps his promises. The third sin was disobedience. The Lord gave a simple order: speak. He didn't say to perform some kind of elaborate ritual, but simply to speak. Instead, we foolishly disobey and act on our own, sometimes wanting to make things more complicated than they are to give more weight to what is being done. But why? If God simply said speak, then do it, that's it. There are no words to add or sticks to strike, but simply to speak. Micah 6:6-8 invites us to practice his justice humbly and to do with humility what God asks of us. The last sin, the most serious one, Moses lacked faith. He didn't believe his words, he added his own, and wanted to do as he pleased. How is it that someone like Moses lacked faith? Because Paul says that when we think we are standing, we must be careful not to fall. 1 Corinthians 10:12. Moses let sin enter him and lost faith, even if only for a moment, but he lost faith and failed, and it cost him dearly. Moses will die in that place, after appointing Joshua as his successor. The journey towards freedom ends with the delivery of this freedom to its beneficiary, the people, perhaps because freedom isn't real if you possess it only for yourself or for people you like. Freedom isn't just a personal possession. Whoever is truly free has the courage to give their life for the good of others. Moses didn't enter the promised land, it's true, but it is written that the Lord buried him in the valley, Deuteronomy 34:6. What better certainty of eternal life? God, the living one, buries those who will live with him. Perhaps on earth we won't get what we want, but if we look to God, we know we'll get much more in heaven. After all he went through, Moses heard this divine sentence against him. He didn't give up and left. Despite having valid reasons, humanly speaking, such as the people's constant complaints and threats, the rebellions they made, their disbelief, the physical exhaustion maybe after all that journey, the stress, he had faith that if he continued to persevere after repenting, he would get much more in heaven. The Bible tells us that there was never another man or prophet like Moses who spoke face to face with God, nor one like him for wonders or miracles or mighty signs that the Lord performed through him. And who appeared on the Mount of Transfiguration to Jesus? Moses with Elijah. You can stumble and fall, of course, but you can also decide whether to stay on the ground and be trampled or to get up, knowing that if you reach the finish line, you will still have the prize. 2 Timothy 4:7-8.